Morning. Welcome to the meeting of the Municipal Light Board of Hingham, January 30th, 2024. This meeting is being held remotely as an alternate means of public access pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 and all other applicable laws, temporarily amending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Excuse me, you're hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. Is there anybody on the line who would like to record this meeting other than the light plant? Okay, I don't see any, so let's move to the first item on the agenda, which is a return to this discussion of the solar credit. Mike, I think that you were going to have a meeting with, excuse me, with the staff about what implementing your proposal would involve, and I've had a similar discussion. So I don't know if you want to speak about that, or if you'd like me to begin on discussing my idea, or what would you like to do?
Yes, I did meet with the HMLP staff, and they do have some updates that I will let them go over in terms of the billing mechanisms.
Okay. Tom, did you want to speak to that, or?
I believe Joan,
Yeah,
you
Okay,
can speak to
great.
that.
I can speak to that. Yes, I reached out to our provider, Cogsdale, about the ability to accumulate kilowatt hours from our solar customers. And if we go to a true net metering system, they have that ability, which means that they'll accumulate the kilowatt hours so that if they have a negative positive amount, it can be reflected in the next month. So they'll be using kilowatts instead of receiving a dollar credit. To do that, we need true net metering, which we currently do not have. We have net billing. I'm still working with them to find out if there's a workaround for our net billing system, or if we have to reprogram all of our meters if the board decides to go to net metering.
So it is feasible to go to a true kilowatt system.
I said we can. I don't know if it's feasible to do that. I mean,
Okay.
that's your opinion, I guess. That'd be true. If the board decides to go to true net metering, then it will be feasible. Yes.
But on a kilowatt basis, not necessarily a dollar basis.
Correct.
Okay, good.
Then you'd have to make a decision as to what would the true up period be, and what would the action be at that time.
Right. Yeah.
Converting it to dollars, would the kilowatts go away, or that's another decision that
yeah. But logistically, it is possible. Cogsdale can do it.
Yes, they can do it. They can accumulate kilowatt hours instead.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Joan.
You're welcome.
Okay. So in terms of my proposal on the solar credit, which is the intention of which is to try to determine what are the avoided costs that HMLP has when solar customers sell their electricity to us. I see, to me, that looked like the fairest way to set the solar credit. And I've met with Tom to discuss how you could do that with our billing system. And during that process, I was made aware that reimbursing for the PCA is not as simple as it seems. A lot of the elements of my proposal are very complicated to figure out. And Tom politely pointed out that rate design is complex. That's why we have consultants to help us do them. I probably don't have the tools to accomplish what I want, which is a fair and accurate credit that reimburses solar sellers for HMLP's avoided cost, but doesn't subsidize any rate class over another. And I realized that the things that we've been talking about lately at the end of our rate study period, where we discussed the question of how to make sure that EV chargers are really charging off peak when we're giving them a credit for doing so, hard to do with our system. how to fairly reimburse solar sellers for the electricity they sell us. Very hard to do with our system. And I realize both of these things are actually interim stopgap measures that, because we don't have the ability to implement our plan of moving to time of use rates at the moment, excuse me, which we've all agreed would be the best and fairest way of everybody having the opportunity to have savings from moving their use off peak. All of our customers are losing out on that opportunity while we don't have the ability to charge at time of use rates, and the light plan is also losing out on the opportunity to lower our peak costs that way. And so at this point, I mean, I think Mike's plan has a lot of appeal in terms of simplicity. I know I said at the last meeting that he a kilowatt hour is not a kilowatt hour, but we don't bill that way. We bill as if a kilowatt hour is a kilowatt hour, and it fits with our rate design right now, but it's not the rate design we want. And so we decided to leave the EV credit system as it is, and at this point I'm ready to leave the solar credit system as it is and move right to the main course, which would be to have a discussion about options for financing the move to new meters so that we can move to a time of use rate system, which will allow everybody to get savings from moving their use off peak. And that's kind of where I am. So I wondered what, Mike, how are you feeling right now about your proposal?
I'm feeling that overall it is in the best interests of the town, the ratepayers, whether there be solar ratepayers or non-solar ratepayers. I think when we go to full time of use metering, that will change the equation for everybody. It will be in the best interests of everybody, and it will save us as a town on what we pay for our electricity. So I am in favor of moving as soon as possible to full time of use metering. I make the very simple equation of laptops. When a laptop becomes outdated and slow, people retire that laptop and they move on to the next generation of laptop. A laptop in this case is our meters, and at a cost of $100 or $130 per meter, we are not talking about getting everybody a new $2,000 laptop. So I think the costs involved need to be carefully looked at on how we finance these time of use meters, and that we make the business decision to invest in the infrastructure of our electrical grid. In terms of the solar credit, I think we need to think very seriously about changing the current system in order to promote more solar within the town. As technology advances with hybrid inverters and vehicle to grid possibilities for cutting our peak and making the most of our personal home infrastructure, I think encouraging more people to put smaller solar systems on their homes is a good thing. It's a good thing because it helps us move our town towards the 2040 net zero target. I'm not in favor of waiting.
So to sum up, you're speaking specifically to moving to a time of use rate system, not in favor of waiting. Do I have that right?
In favor of moving to a time of use as soon as possible, and in favor of adjusting the solar credit to a per kilowatt basis. If you generate a kilowatt hour, you get to use it, with the caveat that you have to use it within a year or you lose it.
Excuse me. Tyler, do you have thoughts at this point?
Sure. I'm in favor of accepting the UFS recommendations for the solar rate. As we are right now, I think it'd be the best situation for the whole town to have new meters and time of use rates for everyone to realize that savings, but we don't have that right now. I'd love to sort of plan that out and timeline that out for when we can accomplish that. I think that accepting the UFS solar rate is the simplest solution right now, as opposed to adopting new complex policies where we have to implement new software and new billing. And I don't think it provides enough uplift in terms of benefit to the town for us to do that at this time. So I'd love to move on from the solar rate discussion and to move on to other issues.
I guess that's sort of where I am as well at this time. Any other discussion from the board on this? We would need to put a motion on the floor to vote on, excuse me, one or the other of these motions. Would one of you gentlemen like to make a motion? Because both
I'll make a
involves
motion
a change from where we are.
I'll make a motion to accept the UFS recommendation for the 3 or 5 year average as managed by Tom.
Okay. Further discussion from the board? Excuse me. Mike, anything you'd like to say?
I've said how I feel.
Okay. Okay, so we could take some comment from the public at this point. It'll be help. I'll look if people want to speak. You can wave your hand. It'd be helpful if you use the down on the little raise hand down at the bottom on your screen. If you're on a computer, you'll see a button that says reactions, and one of the options is raise your hand. It's easier for me to see, but I'll look for people who are raising their hands. Roger, did you raise your hand?
I tried to.
Okay.
Hi, this is Roger Freeman.
Could
Nice
you
to see you all.
state your address for the record, please?
Sure. My address is 350 Beale Street, apartment 2238. It's nice to see all of you. For those of you that don't know, I served on the board for 5 years and left when we moved out to Vermont, but we're back, and so it's nice to see you all continuing this great work. The one comment I'd like to make on this solar issue is that you may recall, Laura, when you were first running for the board, I had strongly been urging that we move to net metering at the full retail rate in order to encourage the adoption of solar through town. And I'd been making that argument. And I also see at the meeting today is John Stoddard, who's also a former member of the board. And it's nice to see you, John. And this is a conversation that John, I, and the other board members had previously. And there were always good reasons not to properly and accurately provide the value that the people that have put solar on their roof to not give them the full value, the net metering value. And at the time, Laura, we discussed this issue and I was pushing hard for it. And you may recall you had said you wanted to wait until there'd been a full and fair rate study and been through that process in order to understand sort of what the impact was. And I certainly understand the logic of that. At the same time, the standard rate studies, as I understand it, don't actually get at the key question of what's the value that the solar household is putting back into the system. And so rate studies, the way they work, as I understand them, and I'm happy to be corrected, but as I recall, you basically take all the costs of the light plant and then you allocate them across customer classes. But they don't typically look at the complicated issues of what the value of solar is, right? And so you may recall at the time, I also suggested that other jurisdictions have looked at this issue for years and extensively and concluded that in most cases, you know, the value that the retail homeowner is providing back to the system for a kilowatt of solar is in excess of the average cost of power. And because it includes a number of things, I would say most importantly, by putting power onto the system, when you add all that up for across the system, you're getting an investment that effectively allows the light plant to defer upgrading lines, to defer substation upgrades. And the state of New York has a formula that's called the VDER, the Value of Distributed Energy Resources, that takes into account all these things and coming up with the credit value. And it's significantly in excess of the average cost of power formula that Hingham's is using. And so, Tyler, I take to heart your point that, you know, it can be complicated, and so let's go with a simple solution. I actually think the solution that Michael Reeve has provided is a pretty simple solution. And the essence is you get to offset your electricity purchased with the credits that you build up on the from your solar system, because the use doesn't always align. So you generate more during the day and put it into the system, and then you use the system energy at night. I hope I'm not being too confusing. The bottom line, I'll get to the conclusion, is this issue has been under consideration for probably 8 or 9 years, and each time it gets put off. And I don't think we're talking about a huge amount of money. And what we do want to do is encourage people to put solar on the roofs and generate as much electricity as we can within the town. And so I think that currently there's a cross subsidy going, but it's in the other direction. It's the people that have solar on their roofs, they're cross subsidizing other townspeople, right? And so, you know, there's a lot of cross subsidy built into the rates and as they're designed. And so a little bit of cross subsidy going the other way, if we're trying to get rid of it, you should advantage the people that are providing it, which are the people that are putting solar on their roofs. I think for the solar potential of most roofs in Hingham isn't going to lead to lots of excess power going onto the grid and sort of stranding the utility assets or eroding the base. With the coming electrification and the initiatives the town is promoting for heat pumps and other resources, we're going to need more electricity in town, not less. We've had this massive system reliability upgrade that's underway. And so I would strongly urge the board to actually take action that's been under consideration for years. You know, time of use rates and new meters, that'll take years to roll out. And I think that's not fair to the people that are doing solar or that would like to do solar. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Susan or Larry Wetzel? Are you there, Susan or Larry? Okay, maybe we'll get back to you. So just what?
Can you hear me now?
Oh,
you hear
yeah,
I'm
kind of.
sorry, technical difficulties.
Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna adjust that. The question I have is that there are about, I think if I've been sitting in on these calls for a while, there's about 110 houses that currently have solar. Is that right, Michael? I think that's what you said.
It's 117 at the last count at the end of.
Okay, so it was 117 houses in this town, and I think we all agreed around 500 vehicles, give or take. That wasn't the figure that we got from town hall, but that's the figure that I think Brianna came up with. So, and we have about
110 are residential. So the others are the train stations and the commercial.
Which is owned by the
properties.
MBTA, right? The train station.
Yes.
So
Yes,
that's not the town. Okay.
Well,
So
it's owned by a third
gets
party.
the power from that
Okay.
facility.
So my question is this. are all the time the ratepayers and well, one point I want to get back to. When we ended the meeting the last time, it ended and there were 3 hands up at that time and we had questions, but no one got called on and the meeting ended. And I understand we were going over in terms of time. But one of the questions was back to the rate stabilization fund. And we were told that there was $7 million in the rate stabilization fund. And we didn't get a question in to ask what was the purpose of it, the rate stabilization fund, and what the plan was for that money. And I would like that someone would address that, because now we're talking about rate changing the meters. And are you planning on taking the money out of the rate stabilization fund to fund this? Exactly how are the people of the town and the ratepayers going to be affected by this? We had I think a 6% rate increase in July. And my understanding, there's another rate increase coming, and I wish someone on the board or either Tom could address whether or not when the next rate increase is due. So we've had 6%. So probably I would say the first question I would ask is there another rate increase coming?
So at our last meeting, Susan, you asked us to stick to the agenda. It was one of the reasons that we didn't go over. And I wonder if if the questions that we didn't get to at the end of the meeting, I would be happy to stay at the end of this meeting and answer questions, larger questions. I'm gonna make an effort to answer these questions without eating into our meeting time too much, to ask people to speak to those questions. So, but I understand that it impacts on your thinking about this issue, but they are larger. Just for starters, we have no plans at all for how we would pay for the move to new meters. So that's what we would discuss next if we're going to move to that discussion, but we haven't even decided to do that yet. Joan, did you want to speak to the stabilization fund and the purpose of it?
Well, before we do that, what is the plan for the next rate increase? That's my number one question.
My recollection is that the plan is for a year from the previous rate increase.
Our bills aren't going to go up anymore? I'm a little confused.
So we have planned a 6% rate increase for each of the next 3 years, which will help us when the time comes to go to the town meeting to ask for permission to bond for our very large transmission project that we're working on. It will buy down the cost of that, so we won't need to bond quite so much.
Well, it won't buy down. That means the ratepayers of Hingham will buy down. I mean, that's our money. So
yes. So the question is
about that.
The question is, should we be raising rates a little bit over time to help cover that, or should we have a really huge rate increase at the moment when we enter into this project? And to me and to the board, it seemed better to do this gradually so as not to have a shock for the ratepayers.
Not to be disrespectful, but we have $7 million in the rate stabilization fund. I am totally confused.
So now I'm going to ask Joan to answer your question about the purpose of the rate stabilization fund.
Hi, the whole purpose of the rate stabilization fund is to stabilize rates. So if there are hidden costs in our rates, it came to fruition when they started with all the nuclear power plants, and they were shutting those down, and we had costs in there to shut these facilities down that were additional costs, and that's how the rate stabilization fund came at the very beginning anyway. And now we use it at the discretion of the general manager to stabilize our rates when necessary.
Okay, John?
Yes, I'd like to express my support for Mr. Reeves'
Could you state, I keep forgetting to ask people to state
Oh,
your
I'm
name.
sorry,
It's required by the, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be pedantic. It's required by the open meeting law that when you speak, you state your name and address.
Yes, and I always do that, and I forgot myself, so sorry. John Borger, 53 Lafayette Avenue. I support Michael's proposal. I think it's an elegant way to finesse all the confusion and the complexity and the shifting sands of, how much a solar account pays to transfer their kilowatt hour that they're not using into their neighbor's breaker box. that changes over time seasonally. There are all sorts of components that may or may not play in that. I think just intuitively as a ratepayer, my conclusion has to be minimal. But I think that the proposal to simply treat a kilowatt hour that's returned to the grid as a kilowatt hour that you've earned is simple, and it finesses all of those issues. I would also like to just simply say that, I'm well aware of this conversation. These conversations happen within the context of our goal in this town of net zero by 2040. And I think that while I may disagree with some of the, finer points of the policy, I just want to say, I think that this board and the light plant management is doing a great job in keeping the lights on, in being responsive to customers, but also trying to steer the light plant in the direction of supporting those policies and policies that support our goal of net zero by 2040. And in terms of the rate increases to fund additions in capacity that are needed for the light plant to continue its reliability and resiliency, I'm fully in favor of paying those increases. You get what you pay for. And, we've all seen instances where, we underfund things and then they go south and then everybody's very unhappy. So thank you.
Thanks. Lori.
Hi, thanks, Laura. Lori Freeman, 350 Beale Street. Apologies for being off camera. I'm a little under the weather. Excuse my voice as well. Just briefly, I just wanted to say that I do think that the board should be doing everything possible to be incentivizing adopting solar on rooftops, and 100 is a pathetic number. And we need to do that as quickly as possible. It helps with resilience. It helps. It's a huge benefit to the town and the electricity grid in the town. So I want to point out that if you weren't in the borders of Hingham, then you would get retail net metering. You get the full benefit. You would get credit for what you're actually providing to the grid. So I think that at a minimum, Hingham should be providing at least what National Grid customers get. And then lastly, I just wanted to say that I think that will help the town's push also for heat pump adoption, because it will become that people's heating costs will go down significantly if they also have the solar panel. So that will sort of boost that the goal of the climate action plan and our town government. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so unless Mike or Tyler has comments at this moment, I've got something to say. But Mike,
I would comment that other municipal light plants, for example, Hull, also provides their customers with full net metering.
yeah. Okay, so
and one final comment. We have just completed a full rate study of our entire electrical system to include future planning for a new transmission line, etc. Those consultants have indicated that net metering does, in their opinion, favor the solar owner. I would counter that with my proposal that because it's a use it and lose it scenario, and we would essentially net things out at the end of the heating season or at the beginning of the solar season, the solar production season, that it's actually a net benefit to the town, because they essentially get the solar production and have that on their books for a number of months before a potential solar customer would use those kilowatt hours for their heating season. And my final point on my proposal is I do want it to treat everybody, each and every single ratepayer in town the same way. So if a future rate study can show that there are additional expenses that are being incurred by those solar customers, then we would have an additional solar customer charge so that everybody is treated fairly. And I would therefore propose, and I would like the opportunity to propose an additional motion, given the further discussion that we've had this morning and comments from the public.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Excuse me. Did you want to amend that motion to, or is it on a different?
It would be an alternate motion.
Okay, maybe for us to evaluate, you could say what it would be.
I would propose that we adopt the kilowatt hour net metering system to be computed through Cogsdale, and those kilowatt hours would accumulate on a net metering basis, and they would expire once a year if they are not used by those customers. And those expired kilowatt hours would essentially be a credit to the HMLP system.
Okay. If we get all Robert's rules about this, we need a second for the motion that's on the floor in order for it to be on the floor, and we would need a second for Mike's motion to become an alternate motion, which we would then vote on first. I don't know if we want to get that formal about it. It's really just a question, and plus there's only 3 of us, so it's really just a question of which one of these proposals we would vote on first. So I think, yes, Tyler, you have a comment.
Yeah, question for Mike.
Yeah.
My understanding is that we need to still upgrade our infrastructure to support the kilowatt hour net metering plan. Is that true, or am I misunderstanding?
That was the understanding at the end of the last board meeting, Tyler. I did have a discussion with Joan and Tom, and they went back, Joan went back to Cogsdale, and they realized and were educated that Cogsdale has now changed their billing system, and they can do the net metering not on a dollar basis, but on a kilowatt hour basis, which would then support my proposal.
And okay. So yes.
So we wouldn't have to swap the existing solar and electrical meters out, which would be the case if we were to go to a full net metering system where essentially the meter spins forwards and backwards. Currently, the solar meter spins forwards and calculates the production of a solar system, but the electrical meters only spin one way. They do not have the ability to go backwards, so to speak.
Okay, I'm going to
If we
call
were
on.
to go to a full net metering system like National Grid do and Hull does, we would have to replace the solar meter, or at least one of the meters for all of the solar customers. But with what Cogsdale can do, or at least I understand they can do, we would not need to do that. Is that correct, Joan? I see your hand up.
Yeah, well, I don't have a workaround for our current system, where is net billing, that what we currently do net billing. Cogsdale hasn't gotten back to me with the workaround for that. So to go to net metering now, we would not have to replace the meters, but would have to reprogram all the meters. I don't know if Steve wants to speak to that, or the time that it might take and cost involved in that, or we can use our current meters. We just have to reprogram our current meters. Is that true, Steve?
That's correct. So myself, the meter tech, and probably the line division supervisor, we'll have to go to each home with our laptops, and I have the program pre-written already. So because we wanted to test it out, we would have to go and reprogram each meter. So real quickly, the first step would be take a final read, then reprogram each meter. So it probably about 10 minutes per home. It could take two, 3 weeks, depending on weather and everything. So I can't have a laptop out in the rain, but just kind of look like that. And it'll be the customer service aspect too of recapturing that final read, re-entering the ERTs, which is the radio frequency for the meters. So they'll have some little back end work to do themselves. We would have to come up with a game plan to make it streamlined.
But so it's possible. It's possible to do it with
Yes.
the current meters that we have.
Yep.
It's
Thank you.
just gonna involve some time and effort, because that's what I'm hearing. Would that sum it up, right?
Yep.
Okay. Larry or Susan?
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm confused about how this is fair to the whole town. Because from what Michael said a few meetings ago, he wasn't interested in having anybody else on the grid, that it was 110 customers, and the discussion was no additional customers on the grid. You go back and
No,
listen to
that's not what I'm proposing, Susan. I want to see as many solar customers on our grid that we can take up to the capacity of the grid.
Right,
I'm
and what
saying
is
I
that with,
don't-
I'm confused about what that is with 20-some thousand homes in the town. I mean, we've got 110 people now. I don't understand. How does everybody else get on board? And what about the senior citizens that can't afford or don't want to convert? About 30% of the town are older people. I heard
So-
someone earlier on the meeting say that they thought that, it would be a great idea, but I don't know where they live. And we've also had the discussion of people in the town that can't afford it. So
to answer
I
your
don't see
question
how
of
any
how
of this
much
is
it is,
benefiting, excuse me, I don't understand how any of this is benefiting the majority of the people of the town. I understand how the 110 people that currently have solar get benefited because you gave them, my understanding is from previous calls, that they got a benefit of $6,000 to have solar panels put on their homes. But I don't understand how that is fair across the board. I'm very confused. I've been on these calls for about at least the last 3 or 4, and actually there was nobody on the call. The most amazing thing of all, and all of a sudden now, all these people are coming out of the woodwork saying solar is great. I don't know how that happened, but I can promise you they weren't the people that have been here listening. And all of a sudden now, it seems to me that there's a conflict here between the board and what they have on their homes and the kind of cars that they drive and the rest of us out here. And it is definitely, in my opinion, some ethical questioning that's going on. First of all, that you have sleepy calls that go on and no one comes on. And all of a sudden, when there's a little bit of pushback from some of us senior citizens that are trying to how to figure out how to pay our bills, all of a sudden then all these people jump on and say, yay, 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 this is great. We want solar. I'm
so
just
let me
stunned.
just suggest that perhaps you and I can have a conversation after the meeting is over. If you have time, we can stay on the call. And
I
when we
don't,
close
I'm
the
sorry,
formal
I don't
meeting
have
and
time.
well,
I
I would
have
love,
an appointment. I don't have time.
okay, anybody else who would like to stay on and discuss the larger questions that they don't have answers for, we can talk about them. If anybody wants to do that, Roger?
Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate your patience here. I do have to, I've been in the energy business for 25 years and I've been to hundreds and hundreds of meetings. And the point that I'll make to some of the people that are here that don't understand, or making it very clear they don't understand, is that solar provides a benefit to the town. On the rooftops, people selling their power back to the town right now are not getting the full value that they're delivering. They're providing a benefit to all the town. And so if anybody's getting a raw deal here, it's the people that put solar on their roofs and are not getting the fair shake. And they're providing value to the town that all the town members benefit from, and they're not getting paid the fair compensation. And I think that, I think as a comment made about the ethics of the board members, I think is out of line. If anything, I think that's they've been over correcting in the other direction in order to avoid any possible inference of some sort of ethical thing. So I think the board is showing the highest ethics, taking the consideration of the people in the town. And so I think those comments are out of line. I would go back to Michael Reeves' point that I don't think this takes a huge change to the existing systems. I think just given the physical limitations of the town and the shading and the rooftops, you're not going to see an explosion of solar on people's roofs. It's a decision that I think probably loses people money overall, but it provides a benefit to the town, and they should at least get the fair value. And I'd urge the board to look at the New York, the VEDR, the Value of Distributed Energy Resources, or even as another commenter, Lori Freeman made, the look at what National Grid has done. I think they reduced the net metering credit and then they increased it. They went back to increase it to include some of the other components, the distribution, the transmission, for systems that were 20 kW or less. Finally, the meters, I believe, were replaced within the last several years. And so as you talk about replacing all the meters in town, I think that's a significant endeavor. So I'd encourage the board to take this interim step, provide the net metering, accept Michael's proposal. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Patty. You are muted. If you're speaking,
There we
Patty,
go. There we go.
if-
Sorry. I just wanted to
Could
raise
you
my hand and
state your name and address?
oh,
for
I'm
the
so
record,
sorry.
please?
Patty Coyle, 3 Accord Lane. I just wanted to say I'm a senior citizen and I'm slowly and cautiously dipping my toe into doing the right thing as far as electrifying Hingham. I do have now an induction range. I'm in a position to look at geothermal heating because I'm redoing the pool area and they're going to dig a hole. So I may as well start asking those questions. The roof is due for repair in the next few years. So solar is in my future. So, please remember that, don't lump all seniors into one bucket, I guess, because there's a lot of folks who are out there trying to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let me.
I think we have someone on the phone that wants to ask a question.
Okay, is there?
I'm not sure who it is.
Okay, if someone could if you're on the phone, could you unmute yourself and say that you would like to speak? If not, oh, here we go. Okay.
Hi, Laura. It's Gary Tondorfdick. I just
Hi,
wanted
Gary.
to comment a little bit. How are
Please.
you today on this nice cold morning?
Good. Please give
I've
your
been-
address, Gary. State your address,
Yeah, Gary
please.
Tondorfdick. Gary Tondorfdick, 1029 Main Street in Hingham. I've been having difficulties getting on my laptop, so I'm trying to negotiate it on my phone. I still haven't figured out how to turn on the video on the phone, but then again, that's me. I just wanted to have a couple comments. I've been on the Climate Action Planning Committee. We've been for a couple of years working on figuring out how we basically begin the transition from carbon and how we basically electrify. And so we're starting in on the Climate Action Commission to basically start to bring some of these ideas into reality. And, I just want to make some personal comments. As a senior citizen who's lived in the town a long time and paying, $4 a gallon approximately for oil to heat an antique house, and wonderful antique house, but I'm looking at the costs here and I'm saying to myself, what's incentivizing me right now is figuring out how do I start to make the transition. And, the heat pump transition is probably my first foray into looking at this. But secondly, I do respect the idea of and embrace the idea of, photovoltaic generation on an individual home basis would also be something that helps things. So I don't see this as something that's contrary. I mean, I see this as an evolving initiative that you all are doing and the rest of us in the town. And, we're all learning. And I think there's a bit of education here might might dispel some of the fears that people have. I support what you're doing and Michael's proposal, so I just wanted to share that.
Thanks very much. So at this point, let me just say why I don't think that I can get on board with Mike's proposal. Roger, I did exactly what I said I was going to do. We did the rate study, and after they were done, I felt like the whole issue around the solar credit that they proposed was very opaque. And it is opaque today. And they didn't, in a sense, they didn't show their work. They gave us the spreadsheet that explained how they developed what their proposal was, but it was not. We didn't have the cliff notes. Let's put it that way. And so I set out to myself investigate all the elements of the bill and ask myself, what are the avoided costs that you and I have talked about in the past? What are the avoided costs that the light plant has that we would fairly reimburse solar sellers for, because the ratepayers are avoiding costs when solar energy comes online from customers. And in my view, that is the right way to reimburse people. And I think that I've concluded that that to come to the right answer on that is it's probably too complicated for us to implement, especially if it's on a short-term basis until we can move to a time of use rate structure. And also I can't satisfy myself about the various components of the bill, which ones are avoided costs, which ones are not. So let me just say that I do find the net metering by kilowatt hour very appealing for its simplicity, but I can't what it means is that the various parts of the bill that are billed by kilowatt hour, then if somebody, let's say somebody has, what's a plausible, somebody has buys 1,000 kilowatt hours in a month, and they have 1 hour of solar credit, then they would be paying for 999 kilowatt hours per month instead of 1,000. And one of the things that does is credit back for that 1 kilowatt hour each of the items on the bill that are billed by kilowatt hour. So that includes capacity, distribution, and transmission, the energy charge, and the PCA charge, and which is another energy charge. And so I feel like in a system where we bill each kilowatt hour the same as every other kilowatt hour, which we have now, all of those things make sense to credit back to the customer, except for the distribution. And the reason that I don't think that's an avoided cost when we buy solar energy from people who sell it to us in town, is that when that kilowatt hour goes on the grid, it gets sold to another customer. So, and it actually probably literally to the person next door. It gets sold to the person next door, and that person pays the distribution charge on that kilowatt hour of energy that's on our grid. So if you are to also reimburse the person who sold us for that distribution charge for that kilowatt hour, now the light plant has paid twice for distribution for that kilowatt hour. And so that is why I don't find net metering to be it doesn't accurately represent all the avoided costs. Now, what does? That was the answer I wasn't able to satisfy myself about. And that was the moment at which I concluded that we would be better off accelerating our move to a time of use rate system where, at least in the case of solar sellers, we would be able to we would be able to implement something much closer to accurate reimbursement for the avoided costs of the light plant, which we can't really do right now. So, Roger, I see you have a response.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Laura. I do appreciate your consideration of these issues, and I know you're thinking deeply about them. I would, again, I'd say that don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. And it is very complicated to figure out exactly the right amount. And I think it's very difficult to ask Laura Burns, chairman of the light board, to figure that out. And I think it's, municipal light plants in general aren't really set up. And when we had this conversation previously, I think I did also anticipate that the typical light plant rate study would not capture this because they're not designed to do that. It's not how they work. What I do know is that the people that are paid lots of money and millions of dollars have been invested in investigating these issues for New York, for example. And I mentioned this there, the value stack and the value of distributed energy resources, where they have taken very deep, comprehensive looks at these issues. I'll note again that Massachusetts, they cut off the net metering, went down to a formula similar to Hingham's. And then because of the results of these types of studies, they went back to increase the credit to people to more fairly reflect the value that's being added to the system. And I think when you look on a specific individual basis, I think it's almost impossible to calculate what's the value. But on a systemic basis, the value that's being provided for those other factors includes the deferred system upgrades. It includes the capacity value, particularly in summer months when you're setting the peak. So at a systemic level, this has been looked at comprehensively, and the conclusion is that the people with solar on their roofs sending power back to the grid are providing more value to the system than they're receiving when you just do the average cost credit. And so the system that I think Michael Reeve is proposing is simply to increase the credit that goes back to those people. And I don't think it should take a substantial amount of work. Given the system upgrades, just to clarify, as I understand it, the meters, that's you're only going to reprogram the ones for people who have solar. So it'd take a little bit of work at the beginning, I think, but then you'd add them as other people came on. And as you know, there's not a mad rush of people putting solar on the roofs. Because it's really it's a choice that people are making to try to improve their climate performance rather than save lots of money or get a freebie from the town. I don't think that's what's happening at all. So I guess the answer, the bottom line is don't make the enemy, the perfect, the enemy of the good. The experts that have studied this have concluded that something more like full net metering credit is actually what's fair. And so until you really figure out the time of use and the new meters, which is a substantial investment and process, as I said, the board was, I think the HMLP just replaced the meters right around when I came on the first time, about 2015. And I know they have some reprogramming capability, but that's a substantial endeavor. And so in the meantime, I urge the board to take this interim step, which is more fair for everyone, actually, and don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. I hear what you're saying, and I have read some of the studies on larger issues. My problem is that I feel like I need to it's to translate the general consensus of experts that there are benefits to having the solar energy on the grid to what we actually do right here on the ground. I feel like I need data. I need to be able to back that up and say, yeah, this is, for us, it's this much that, we save this much in capacity and we save this much in transmission. Transmission is a big one. We know that transmission is happening all the time, even though we only get billed for it once a month. And, but I have not been able to arrive at a data-driven view of how to set this solar credit, which is what is giving me pause.
Sure.
John, let me just, do you want to respond directly to that, and then we'll have John? Okay.
Yeah, I guess my request then would be, let's just table this till next meeting and give me the chance to come back to you and sort of we can have a deeper discussion if you like. I'd hate to sort of have the board sort of kill this issue and then be able to say, oh, well, we considered, handled, voted, and killed it. We'll talk to you again in 3 years. I'd like the opportunity to provide you the data, and maybe the other board members that are interested, to try to support and get you comfortable with the numbers that are out there to prove the point that the value is greater than they're being compensated, than those solar people are being compensated for now, number one. And number two, to not make to convince you that we shouldn't make the perfect the enemy of the good. It's a good thing to provide and incentivize more solar here in town.
Thanks. John?
Just
Oh, Mike, did you want to respond to that? Sorry.
I would just like to reiterate, there's two benefits to what I'm proposing. If a solar customer generates and produces a kilowatt hour, they get the chance to use that by further electrifying their home with a heat pump, or reducing their gasoline use with an electric car, or reducing their gas or propane or electricity use to dry their clothes. Those technologies are all here. From a resilience perspective, a microgrid is a huge benefit to a single family home or a neighborhood. Having more solar to provide a microgrid with a hybrid inverter and an automatic transfer switch, all of which a homeowner could potentially invest in to be able to go off the grid at a time when the grid was down, is a huge benefit to seniors, to school children, to families, to our community as a whole. And I believe that it is in the best interests of our town to put as many of these self-sustaining microgrids out there within our community as we can. And I believe that putting a good, well thought out net metering policy out there for the existing and the potentially new solar customers is in the best interests of each and every one of us.
Thanks, John. You were muted. You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm also a senior citizen, and I put solar panels on my roof because I thought it was the right thing to do, because I'm concerned about climate change. All the senior citizens that I know are similarly concerned, and they want to do something, and they are anticipating that they know that we caused the climate change that we're seeing. We've doubled the carbon in the air in the last 30 or so years. This generation, we have a moral obligation to future generations to fix this to the extent that we can. Solar is just one of a whole panoply of potential solutions to this. So we want to incent solar. I'm not looking for pennies from heaven from the light plant. So if you want to exclude current solar accounts from changes in the net metering policy, I'd be happy to forego those supposed benefits, okay? But I would like to see the light plant change its policy as a small incentive for future solar customers, and to persuade them that it's pretty simple to go this route. You know, incentives have to be simple. If we all get bogged down in complex rate calculations and whether or not, you know, I'm paying a transmission charge and my neighbor's paying a transmission charge, people's eyes are going to glaze over, and it's not an incentive. It just becomes a boring conversation. In terms, Laura, of your and that's why I'm here, because I love boring conversations. In terms of your point, Laura, about transmission costs, what are avoided costs? I think the right question is, what are avoided incremental costs? The infrastructure to transfer a kilowatt hour from my breaker box put in to my neighbor's breaker box is already there. It has to be there so that we can get kilowatt hours from the light plant. In addition, my neighbor is paying the full freight for the kilowatt hour that I sent over from my solar panels. So I don't see an incremental cost here to the light plant. So that's why I think Michael's proposal elegantly finesses all of these complexities and also emulates, that noted charitable institution, National Grid, their policy. So I think that, we can do worse than do what the largest electric utility in the state is doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll take one more public comment, and then I think we're going to have to move to a vote on one or the other of these proposals. Susan or Larry, whoever it may be. You're muted, Susan.
I'd like to say, for those of you that hadn't joined us for the last few meetings, the reason that I got involved in this was because I realized that there are many people in the town of Hingham that are suffering. I'm a registered nurse by background. People come to me and tell me that they're suffering. People are not concerned necessarily about solar. They're concerned about paying their bills, paying their taxes, putting food on the table. And I have invited people to recognize that we have a very robust place here in Hingham where people get food. So solar heat is not a priority. For those of you that are on this call, come to our swap sometime and look at the people that are coming there and getting things. The town needs to recognize that people do suffer, that people are concerned about their heating bills and paying their bills and the tax increase. And that's the reason I've gotten involved, because my life has always been with the real people, the people that are living day to day and trying to make a living. And believe it or not, there's a lot of us here in Hingham. So when
Thank
you
you,
think
Susan.
about rate increases, and I'm a little confused about what the total was, because you said it was going to be incremental. So it was 6%, and it's going to go up again in small incremental till you get to where you want our bills to be. Maybe before we hang up, someone could once again tell me, maybe Joan could tell me what the rates are going to be, so that I'm clear for those of us that live on a budget, and for all the people in the town that do, that we know what we're going to be facing.
I just,
Joan, could you-
yeah, I just want to clarify. So Laura, you mentioned you thought the rates were going up in July. The rates are actually going up this month again. So in 22, we started the rate study with the intention that we would increase our rates in January of 23. That was delayed until July. So we implemented that increase in July. The next increase would have been the beginning of this year. So our intention, and there'll be a letter posted in the paper tomorrow, that our rates will increase by 6% on February 1st. And I
And then
apologize to the board if I didn't explain that to you, but
And we project a third 6% increase a year later,
correct.
just to complete the process.
So-
Okay.
I just want to clarify this for myself. So you're telling the people of the town of Hingham that our rates are going to go up a total of 18% from
Correct.
July till, so, hey, folks, for those of you that don't worry about your money, we only got a COLA of 3% this year, those of us that are on Social Security. And the people that live down, as far as I know, at 86 Central Street, live on that COLA. So their rates are going up 18%. If I understand you right, Tom. Is
That's
that
correct. Yep, that's correct.
18%. Okay, that's a lot of money when you get a COLA for 3%.
And we did implement a income adjusted rate this year. So
I know you did,
that-
but that's not
yeah.
18%, is it?
That is 10%.
Yeah.
So
And that rate will be, that low
that rate will not change.
adjusted income
this-
rate will be rediscussed by the board.
in 3 months, correct?
Yeah, we set that at 10%, and then we plan to reevaluate it every 3
Yeah.
months to try to determine what the impact of it will be on light plant revenue, and if it looks feasible, we hope to raise that.
Well, I'm
Um,
hoping that you folks will contribute to the food pantry because you're gonna see people increasing there if their light bill is going up 8%. And it's located right on Main Street. So for those of you that don't go, you can volunteer, get involved with people that are suffering in this town. And certainly those people that live that close to the cloth are gonna be more concerned about putting food on the table and heat in their house than worrying about solar panels. And I'll close it with that.
Thanks very much for your thoughts, Susan.
We do run a food drive every year at HMLP, typically in the fall.
Thanks. So to return to the item on the agenda, so I had said, John, that I would take one more public comment. And can you make this very, very brief? I don't like to cut off discussion.
Yes, yes. I would like to ask Susan if the food pantry includes a service.
John, I really need to bring this back to the agenda. Right?
Yeah, it's a brief question. Does the food pantry include a service that helps people understand all the subsidies and supports like your low income policy?
Okay,
that are
John,
available
maybe,
to them?
no,
If
really.
not, I'd like to volunteer. That's my question.
Okay, great. I can put you guys in touch, but I don't, the food pantry is great to hear about, but it's not on the
Yeah.
agenda. John Leonard, you haven't spoken, so go ahead. We really need to move along on our agenda.
Do you hear?
Not very
Is it
well.
functioning?
Not really, no. I'm sorry. Try speak again.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, John, I'm sorry, but we're not here. John,
And
we're not hearing anything you're saying. I'm really sorry. Your
internet connection is no good, is weak, it sounds like.
How about you send the light board an email with your comments, since we can't hear them this morning. lightboard@hmlp.com. I'm sorry we can't hear you. We just can't hear you. Okay, to return to the item on the agenda, which is the solar credit. I think yes, Tyler.
I do agree that I don't think that we are appropriately compensating solar customers at the moment. I'm a big fan of distributed generation, all sources of generation within the Hingham footprint. That's going to be a huge benefit to all of us. I am glad that, Michael's plan would not cause us to have to upgrade a lot of hardware. That was a big roadblock for me. I'm not convinced of a couple things with the current plan that Mike has. So I'd be interested in possibly seeing if we could tweak that. The first is that, I was a big fan of what Laura was doing with the solar rate and trying to find the appropriate rate with our avoided costs appropriately taken care of fairly for all customers. So I need to see the same thing from Mike's plan. And on the other thing, I could only be in favor of this plan until such a time as we move away from the one rate all hours of the year. Because when we start this plan and we move away from it to a time of use rate, it essentially gives customers a virtual battery, and that's a subsidy way too far for me. So we'd have to have some sort of a sunset provision with the plan to make sure that we would redesign the rate at that time as moving away from the current rate structure. So, pure net metering, I think that actually has been found to be a subsidy towards the solar customers, and, although there is no perfect, and so I certainly take Mr. Freeman's comments to heart, and not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I don't think anyone's come up with a perfect plan so far in rate design as it pertains to credit for renewable energy resources and distributed generation across the entire country. There's always the pendulum swinging one way or the other right now, but certainly we could push the pendulum towards the solar customers more in a much more fair way than we are right now.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, I take your comments well, Tyler. I did, to be fair, I did try to build some time of use into what I was proposing, in that those kilowatt hours couldn't be applied to an on-peak period at a time we did go to full time of use metering. But I'm in favor of tweaking it and working it to address your concerns.
I think it's fair to say that this rate would be redesigned with all the others when we
Yeah.
approach a time of use
Yeah.
regime. So what I would suggest, Tyler's motion was to adopt the proposal of the consultants, the UFS rate study consultants on the solar credit, and I would vote for that and state that we'll leave the door open for more examination of Michael's approach if it can possibly absorb more elements of my approach that make adjustments for costs here and there. I'm imagining the only part of it that I really have a problem with is reimbursing the distribution. So if we were to adopt kilowatt hour net metering and then have a solar charge for customers to cover that part, that it's yeah, I think Roger's right that having Laura Burns having to design this credit is perhaps not the most effective way to go forward. But as one of the three people charged with setting the rates, I feel a requirement to understand them and have a data driven notion for why we're adopting what we're adopting. So I'm willing to continue to work on that and think about it again if we need to.
So I would propose that we come back for the next meeting and tweak our plan and then see if there's a motion from
So,
there.
okay, so I would suggest we try to do some work with the staff to to make sure we're not doing this in a vacuum. And we'll need to check our agenda and see if we're ready to come back. Yes, Tyler.
Is question for Joan. At the proposed UFS solar rate, is that I'm expecting it's higher than the previous rate. Is that correct?
No, it's not.
No. Okay.
If I remember correctly, it's around 7 cents. We're currently given 10 cents.
Okay.
Oh, that is a huge drop. I'm not sure I favor that. I would almost prefer leaving our system the way it is until we're going to make a change, if we're going to make a change.
If you look what happened recently in California when they changed their net metering policy, it had a detrimental effect on the uptake of solar. Net metering is what makes solar work. It's essential. Otherwise, solar is just not feasible.
What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, I'm still in favor of either leaving as is, adopting the new rate, and still happy to consider Mike's plan once we workshop it a little bit more.
Okay, I would be in favor of not, I don't want to make a lot of changes in the interim, multiple changes. So I would be in favor of leaving it as is and possibly working with Mike's rate some more. Is that something that we can have a consensus about? So let me just ask the board members. The proposal is to leave our rates as they are for the moment, continue to workshop Mike's proposal to some degree and bringing it back for further discussion at some point.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of that, Laura.
Second.
Does that sum it up, Tyler? Okay. So that's what we will do. Thanks very much, everybody, for your time and attention. I appreciate it. Roger, you can, feel free to, forward to the board whatever you think will help us with this small problem.
So we'll put it on our agenda for the next meeting.
Okay. That's in 2 weeks. Can we, I'll do that if I feel like we're at a point where we're ready to have a valuable discussion about it.
I would
it might
propose
take,
we push it off to the meeting after that.
yeah. So
I feel
that's
like we
the
built
next,
up a backlog.
yes, the next meeting is in 2 weeks. Could we bring it up at our regular, what month is it? It's January, at our regular March meeting. Would that be acceptable to you, Mike?
My only concern is that I think it's important that we implement it around that time. And the reason that I proposed with the March bill was because that was towards the end of the heating season when we would do a true up and solar customers would have the opportunity to use those kilowatt hours that they'd banked or lose them. And that would be concurring with the start of the solar production season when.
Well, I think that's a good reason to do it then.
So as
But
long
if it's
as we're
not ready,
to implement at that time when we make a vote, I would be on board with delaying until March. But I don't want to see it as a roadblock that we can't move forward with it at that time.
I think we can guarantee that we won't be ready to implement on the day that we take a vote, because we're not going to ask the staff to do work in advance of taking that vote, not knowing which way it's going to go. So I don't think we can. But I also don't want to implement something that's not fully baked or satisfactory to the whole board. So let's just we'll be in touch with Tom and we'll figure out what's the right time to put it back on the agenda. We'll leave it loose for now, if that's okay with you.
I think that's good.
Okay, fine. Thanks. Okay, so generally we allot, if we can, an hour and a half for these meetings. We have a few more items on the agenda which we cannot address. Tyler, what is your situation today?
I have to leave at 9.
Okay. So these other items on the agenda, we're going to have to move to the next meeting, which is 2 weeks from now. Unless, Tom, I see demand response is on the agenda. Was there something that you wanted to share with the board about that right now?
I had hoped to have an update from E&E, but have yet to get an update from them.
Okay.
You know, we did talk with NetPeaker, which is the company that MWIC uses. You know, to go with an individual program with them would probably be expensive. So if we can't get a program with E&E off the ground, we'll move to MWIC's program.
Okay, so, but we'll have the opportunity to, hopefully MWIC would come in and give us a pitch and tell us everything that's involved in their program before we make any decisions, correct?
We can do that.
Yeah, because
do we have an idea of the cost, Tom?
We have an idea of the cost with MWIC, I believe, but E&E's cost is up in the air because they were looking for a number of MLPs and they didn't get that number, so they're readjusting the cost to see what it would be.
So could we have somebody from MWIC come in and talk to us about their program?
We can do that, yep.
Please, thanks.
Okay. Okay, and then the other 2 items on the agenda was discussion of financing options for ratepayers. Is that, Mike, we talking about on-bill financing? Is that the?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want us to be working on this and to be looking into potentially creative solutions. I understand that there is a proposal that's going to be discussed at upcoming meetings within the town this week that is appropriate only to commercial customers. But I think we need to be proactive in hunting down what's available for residential customers. And if I compare what's out there with the investor-owned utilities, you know, it is potential for somebody on limited income to finance for 0% additional equipment, heat pumps, solar for their homes, that their savings would pay for that over time and allow them to affordably migrate to an all electrical system. So I think we need to be proactive in hunting this down.
Okay, and then the other item was time of use rates and AMI metering. Is there a specific proposal, or you just want to return to the discussion? I know I want to return to the discussion right away.
I want to underscore the benefits to everybody. It will help HMLP succeed in their mission of lowering rates sustainably for all ratepayers. I think it's technology that is available. I have personally researched this. I have seen 2 of the larger meter companies incorporate the intelligence that the software Sense can give a homeowner through an app. I think there's minimal installation costs. I think it's a huge benefit. I've asked Tom to get quotes from both of those meter companies to put them in direct competition for each other, to put together a cost proposal on what it would cost to migrate the whole of the HMLP grid to full time of use metering. I think the benefits of doing this sooner rather than later far outweigh the costs.
Yeah, I think that decision, before we can try to get those costs, we can get costs at a high level. But if we want to get, what it's actually going to cost us to do this, we need to have a decision, and then we need to go out on an RFP.
And that's all fair and good. I think at a high level cost, the board needs to understand what the magnitude of the investment would be, and then to figure out how we can best facilitate payment of that.
Yeah, at a high level, we had that cost.
At a high level, we need to understand what it would cost per meter times 8,000 meters.
We had that at a high level, 4.5 million to upgrade the metering system, and that would not include labor to install the meters, but it was 4.5 million for the meters and the system.
Is that from both of those companies? Incorporating Sense?
I believe we got that estimate through Itron.
So one was Itron, and who was the other company? They were close. I mean, they were close. RFP would give you more granular cost, since there's various meter types that we have.
Right. I understand that. So there's tie-in gear and there's Itron. But both of those have the ability to incorporate the CTs that would allow Sense to apply their technology within a home. I need to understand per meter what both of those companies would charge. I mean, the infrastructure is going to be pretty much the same for the reporting level, no matter what company you use for the meters. What I want to understand is what the cost would be, or the additional cost would be, if we were to go with one of those vendors that has already made the business decision to implement Sense into their meters.
So
you don't necessarily need.
Your request is that we only look at meters with Sense. I
think the board should look at all meters and make a decision based on cost. What I would like to see is what the numbers are for the 2 companies that have gone with Sense into their system. Because I think the labor costs there's no labor costs for HMLP to go with Sense.
Correct.
And there's no cost to the ratepayer to download an app and link to Sense.
Yep.
And I think the data that they will get is very, very useful, and in fact will make their homes more safe than they may already be. There are so
Well,
many benefits I see with this program. It's developed in Cambridge. It's widespread. They have a huge customer base, and the program has matured rapidly. And now it's available essentially for free within these smart meters that we are looking to move towards. I would like to understand the costs.
Well, some of the meters now, I mean, they have platforms that are already pretty much built in, so you actually don't need sense metering within the home. So the customers,
You mean we get the same data from,
you get the same data. They have web portals that you can log into your address, your account, and you can see live data. So I mean, there's companies like Landis & Gear, there's Cooper, there's
So
Nighthawk.
Landis & Gear and Itron are the two that I'm aware that have sense embedded. And I believe that they have data-driven information that is far superior to just what you're talking about with a regular non-sense system.
Yeah, the only difference, like I have a sense at my house, it's just two CT clamps around your incoming wires. All meters have the capability of reporting. I've done a lot of research on them. They all pretty much give you the portal and live voltage currents.
No, I understand that part, Steve, but what sense, let me just explain what sense does. It uses machine learning and algorithms to determine which appliances you're using and how much those appliances are using in terms of power. And it does that through looking at and measuring it, thousands of times per second, what is going on in your home as you switch on and off different devices. And it compares data from thousands of other homes to figure out that, oh, I just turned my electric kettle on, or I just turned a heat pump on. And it gives the consumer much more information on their electrical usage and how that is actually being used. And it puts that information into an application and tracks your electrical usage and gives you statistics and tips and advice on how to better manage your home. It also has the ability to check if you have, for example, a floating neutral, which could be a potential fire hazard. I don't believe any of the other metering technology can do that. I think we also need to look at companies that provide the ability to do our water meters. We own our water utility. I think we should have a system that reports water and electricity on the same system, thereby eliminating the cost of replacing water meters.
so it seems like what you're describing, Mike, could be point requirements that we could put into an RFP. And so that if there were other systems that provided the same benefits, they could bid, and then we could get those functions one way or another if we put them into the ultimate RFP. So maybe let's do this. Let me try to shape the discussion on this for the next agenda with Tom a little bit and figure out what information we need to be able to bring in. And I think Tom's got what Mike would like to have, and maybe Tom and I can talk about what else we'd need to have in advance of the meeting to have a productive discussion. I'm just going to say at this point that it's been the consensus of the board all along that we're anxious to move towards a time of use structure, and that the next discussion is probably how we would finance that. If how we would find that to be possible in the current financial regime, I guess, is the way I would sum it up. Would that be right?
And what the savings would be to the ratepayers based on having that technology applied.
Yeah. I mean, I know that we got that one-off answer from one company, and they projected just an enormous amount of savings to customers. It was so enormous, I wasn't sure I wanted to rely on that. It seemed a little, I couldn't really buy it, but I feel like we could, construct either a study or an RFP process that would help us understand that in greater detail.
Continued.
Yeah.
Could
Yeah.
I make a motion that we adjourn our meeting for today and continue another time?
You certainly may. I think we have discussed what we, each item on the agenda, what we're gonna do with it. So, Tyler, I assume you second that motion? Okay, all in favor, Tyler? Mike?
Aye.
Laura? Aye. Thanks very much. To be continued.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.